Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Unfiltered Vet Discussions. My name is Kelly, and I'm being joined by Stacey and Jenni. We are the ladies of the Unfiltered podcast crew today. And in honor of that, Stacey, Dr. Stacee Santi, has just released a book that is, and I'll let you say it in your own words on your why and everything, because we were talking about it, but is really more focused to the females in society than, to men. So Stacey, tell us a little bit about this book and the why, it takes a lot of effort to drive a book. So you have to be kind of motivated. So what was the why behind it?
Yeah, first off, I had no idea how much effort it would take. So I it did require at the end quite a bit of just grit to finish this project. But I certainly didn't want to get 75% down the line and like leave it. So I powered through. But it's called Stop Acting Like a Girl. And the reason I wrote this is because for many, many years, it's been in my head as I've worked predominantly with women and managed predominantly women. And I've also, through the act of my company getting my veterinary practice getting purchased by corporate and then me selling my company, that's mostly men. But there are women up there in the high seats. They are there. And I started to just see like, wow, things are done quite a bit differently when you're a female and you're working in a man's world up at this high level. So I started to pay attention to this, and then I could see this in my lady employees, that how different they were in some regards to the male employees I interacted with. But then I've got these two amazing nieces that are 21 and 23. They're just my little darlings. And, they're just starting out on their life. And I so want them to do fantastic. And I see the pressures they're under, and the social media alone is a whole nightmare. But the anxiety, the stress of being as good as the other girls, and they do things like over apologize for like everything, and they stress about things they cannot control. And I thought, you know what? I don't want them to go through life and discovering the solutions like I did. So I basically wanted to impart as much wisdom I could to them. And so when I would reach a writer's block, or like even in my own head, what will people think of me writing this? I just went back to thinking, what would I say to Lindsay and Elizabeth if they were sitting right here with me? And I pick back up very easily because I just wrote it in that tone. And several people have told me, like, I feel like when I read this book, I'm just having coffee with you. And I'm like, okay, that's exactly what I wanted, is I'm just sharing my view on the world with young women.
It
That's
is it
fantastic.
is a very easy read. Like
Well, yeah, and Lindsay told me, Aunt Stacey, I love this book because I don't have to read very much at one time, which I did know because these kids talk in clips.
yes.
They
And they
talk
don't
and
read.
no,
They
they
don't read
talk and think like they text. They got short attention spans. So I wrote the book so you could start and stop very easily, and you didn't have to like commit to reading the whole thing at once.
Well, and I think so. First of all, I think this is just extremely needed in our society, and especially in our industry, in the veterinary industry. I mean, I have 26 team members. One is my husband, the rest are all women, um, and I have two daughters, we talked about this before we got on, that my oldest is always like, "Oh, I'm so sorry it's raining out." You didn't make it rain, babe. You don't have to apologize for it. Like, I don't. And she's really difficult because I am not really like that. Like, I've spent my whole life being very unapologetic, which has its own consequences. But so she kind of got this from outside of this household, but that's the point, right? Is that we're getting these messages from so many different places, you know, in preschool, as girls were taught, oh, good, you're sitting still, shh, don't talk. And the boys are running around like lunatics, and it's, oh, they're just boys, and it starts so early on. They've done studies that have shown that the way that we hold babies, girls are held tighter to your body and held still, whereas boys are bounced around, and it just, I mean, it starts that early, and it's so unconscious. So to me, this book is so uh just so needed. And I just love, yes, that it is an easy read. Some stuff, listen, there are some books that I'm always trying to listen to books to better myself, and there are some that I just it's not going to happen. I don't finish them. But this is like, right, bullet, like it's just very short paragraphs. And so yes, I think you did an amazing job in that. It is a very easy book, and I am excited to see this take off in the world. So I just think it's like, what was the catalyst that started you? Yes, you have your nieces and you knew why you wanted to write it, but what was the, okay, I'm gonna sit down and do it, like, this is it?
Yeah. So about 5 or 6 years ago, I wrote a blog about, I mean, just I popped out a blog one morning at coffee because I was frustrated with some of my women employees. And I love that blog. I've always thought about it. And even I posted on LinkedIn and whatever. And I know it hit a few chords with people because through the years, even this one lady from like Asia reached out to me and asked me if she could publish my blog in Asia. I'm like, well, I don't care. But I knew there was something to it. So when I was submitting my sessions to WVC earlier this year in 2024, I threw that one in there. I'm like, they probably won't hit on that, but they did. Leslie Mamalis picked it up. So I was so excited. I did this session, 50 minutes. I probably had a couple hundred women in the room, a few men. And I gave my talk about my 6 major points. And it was really touching to me because a lot of women were contributing to the conversation. They were crying, they were sharing, they were stressed. Like I left that talk, and I've given a lot of talks over the years, but I left that one and I couldn't sleep that night. Like I was just restless, and I called my mother in the morning and I was just telling her, and I kind of started crying, which is weird for me. I'm not like a crier. And she goes, wow, you've really hit on something. And she herself is a pioneer in women's work. She was the only woman in a sea of men at the railroad. In fact, when she got her job at 19 at the railroad, they didn't even call her name for a year. She was known as Sister. And she climbed the ranks and became a very high end manager. And which is probably where I get some of my directness from, because she always parented with directness, which I'm sure she had to use in her job. But anyways, I said, Mom, I think I should write some more about this. Maybe I'll write some more blogs. She goes, maybe you ought to write a book. And she goes, I think you have a lot to say on the topic. And what do you think about it? And I'm like, I've never written a book, but maybe I could try. And so that was my catalyst. So I just sat down every morning and tried to write a chapter. And then it was very light, like 1,500 words, 2,000 words. And then I'd kick it to my mom and she'd kick it back. And I just kept expanding each chapter. And then it just like got bigger and bigger. And then I had to bring other women in to help me organize the layout. Like my thoughts were a bit of a vomiting effect on the pages.
Vomiting effect.
I had a lot of help to bring it to life.
I think that is I think that's just amazing. And I love that your mom is involved in the whole thing, because I think it's interesting when we think about, in the space of just a few generations, how much has changed for women. your mom on the railroad, my mom wasn't allowed to wear pants. She was a teacher. And when she got pregnant, once you started to show, you were expected to leave. Like because apparently no one was allowed to show that they were pregnant, which I still am like,
Wow.
why? But that was the norm, was that, oh, you're starting to show, you can't work anymore. And now, you know, we're doing everything. Pregnancy, just keep moving on. And it's so funny to me to think about how much has changed in not just our lifetimes, but in the lifetimes of our mothers and the lifetimes of our grandmothers. And this next generation, I don't know that they know that. I,
Yeah.
you
I
know,
don't know that they know that.
I don't
Like,
think that they understand, because now it just is.
yeah. Yeah. They don't, the olden times, which
Right.
are not that far
Right.
away. But, the title of the book actually came from my me mom, my grandma, because she did not want me to be a veterinarian. And I lived with her my senior year of high school, and we had, I remember we were hosting a garage sale in her garage, and she was like, so what are you going to do after high school? I said, well, I'm going to college and I'm going to be a veterinarian. And I just can't believe you're going to do this. This just isn't something girls do. And I said, well, that's what I want to do. And she said, well, why don't you become a hairdresser in Amarillo? Like, that would be an amazing career for a woman, for a girl. And that's what she wanted to do. See, she never got to do that in her time because it
Right.
would have required her to step out of the norm.
Right.
And I said, well, I think that would be a great job, actually. I do spend a lot of time on my hair, which you probably can't tell today. But I want to be a veterinarian. And she's like, it's just not for girls. And I said, well, maybe I'm not going to act like a girl, me mom. And that's kind of where I got the title. It turns out when I became Dr. Santi, she she's so proud of me. I couldn't even go back home to Clovis, New Mexico, without her making a very awkward, as soon as you'd meet anyone, even at the Stanley's grocery store, she'd be like, have you met my granddaughter? She's a doctor. She's a veterinarian. She was just so proud of it. But I think, it wasn't allowed then. It wasn't norm. She couldn't see it. But once she saw it, she's like, heck yeah, we should all be doing that. And I think we all feel that way for our daughters
Yes.
and our sons too. But,
Yeah.
for our daughters, for sure, that maybe don't have the same norms attached to them as boys do.
Right.
And it's those invisible barriers we don't know. I mean, the same thing. So my daughter can swim. And some of her competitions is where I graduated from high school, because they have a brand new multi-million-dollar facility. So everybody's like, we're going there for sectionals, right? Because it's gorgeous. And you get a little bit of time in all kids sports to kind of wander around as a parent, right? Because it's a little bit of excitement, a lot of time, a lot of wait time, but you're there. And I was thinking, like, well, somebody asked me, they said, well, why were you in high school swimming? And I had to think about it. And I'm like, no, why wasn't I in high school swimming? And I asked my mom, and I'm like, why wasn't I in high school swimming? And she had to stop and think. I said, my brother was. I remember going to my brother's meets and everything. Well, that started us down a rabbit hole of, when was girls swimming in the state of Minnesota a thing? Like, because we didn't have a girls swim team. This was in the middle of the 80s. We didn't have a girls swim team. And so now I'm researching it, and like only like 3 or 4 and like the really big wealthy areas of Minnesota had a girls swim team, and they all kind of like just competed with themselves, and it was in the Twin Cities area, and that was it. And we all were like, wow, that's really interesting. And then fast forward to today, I'm like, well, that's why I wasn't on the girls swim team. It didn't exist. I love swimming. I love swimming. You go into that school today, and then what they do today with kids sports is they get the whole team and they make huge banners of the whole teams with like creative backdrops, and and they're like 15 feet long banners. I mean, they're huge, and they put them up on the wall. So many girls' sports were up there, like, oh, there's rowing, oh, there's hockey, oh, there's this. And I had to stop and think, what were my choices?
Mm.
Volleyball,
Cheerleading,
basketball, cheerleading,
Cheerleading.
baton twirling.
right? Yeah,
Yep. Yep. Dance team. We had a very progressive dance
Yeah,
team.
dance
see, we didn't
team,
even have a dance
band.
team.
I
Band.
mean, gymnastics. Those these, and I don't want it to come across like I'm male bashing. And this book is not about that at all.
No.
It's more about breaking norms
Mhm.
and feeling okay about that, and realizing that actually people have been breaking norms for a long time, but there's still more to break, right?
Right. Well, see, and I think that's the point, is that this younger generation, our children, our, nieces, our youngest team members, they don't know that, right? We didn't have these options. These were not options for us when we went to school. They are now options for them. And yet, so many of these norms are still available. So many or still expected, for
Oh,
girls
yeah,
to
they're
keep their
still
mouths
alive
shut.
and well.
Yes, exactly. It's like the whole thing of, a girl won't raise their hand unless they're 110% sure they have the answer right. Whereas a guy will be like, yeah, I got like a 40% chance I got this right, but I'm going to go for it. How does that happen? Where does that come from? And those norms are still there. So even though
I
there's
think
more
it can.
opportunities, it still is a problem. And I do think it is a problem that in general, women are still, oh, I'm sorry to bother you.
Yeah.
Whoa.
I see it a lot too in the whole imposter syndrome thing. I mean, I do know that men have this too, boys and men have this too, but I think it's more my subjective analysis suggests it's more prevalent in women, girls and women, where they have this whole imposter syndrome thing going, which makes sense because they don't have as much time in the saddle of leading and getting. I mean, we only got credit cards in the 80s. You could only get, it was 83
Right.
before you could get a credit card in your name. So we haven't been doing it all that long. So it's natural that we might feel like, hey, we don't know what we're doing. But when it starts to affect your ability to move forward and it starts to paralyze you, like that's where we're totally different. Like everyone probably has feelings like, I'm not sure what I'm doing. But a boy is more comfortable to just power through, where I think a girl, more times than not, thinks 2 or 3 or 4 times about it before they power through. And so I want to tell the young girls out there, like, the thing with imposter syndrome is everybody has imposter syndrome. You are not unique. Someone labeled it recently in the last decade, I think. But prior to that, we've all had insecurities, self-doubt, nerves that kick in when we're doing something for the first time. And once you do it for the first time, second time, third time, guess what? You're less nervous. You don't feel like an imposter anymore. That's like life. That's normal. That doesn't make you weird. That doesn't make you abnormal. It doesn't make you different. It's you've just attached too much to the whole thing. Instead, I say, freaking go for it, man. What is the worst thing that's going to happen to you? You bomb, you get embarrassed. It doesn't work out the way you expected it to. Chances are very high you will recover, get back up, and do it again. I think not trying is the biggest mistake a girl can make. Just feeling like they don't have it together yet, and that whole yet thing just is super expensive price to pay in life.
So where does the switch happen? I was thinking about this the other day. If you watch kids, not your own or whatever, or just a playground of kids, they just go for it. They just want to see, can they climb the monkey bars and make it all the way across? Can they slide down? Can they be faster than the next person next to them? Zero fear. which as a parent sometimes may cause you a few gray hairs and some heart attacks, right? Because they're
so
just
true.
like, you're like, jumping off a 50-foot tree is not ideal. Let's not do that today. I'm going to tell you that one's going to end badly. Can we try a 5-foot tree first, before we go rappelling off a larger object, right? But it's that fearlessness. Where do we lose it? Because we lose it somewhere. Like what Stacee, what you were just saying, I feel personally, subjectively, is a learned behavior pattern, because we come out of the womb with this idea of why not? Where's that curiosity? When did we start to fear? This is kind of some of my new musings that I have in my copious amount of spare time at 3 a.m. when I can't sleep. Like when
Well, for me, as not as a parent, but as the girl with a brother, my parents, my dad in particular, was so protective of me. Like he just didn't want me to get hurt by anybody. He didn't. I I just was. I don't want to say didn't encourage. My parents didn't encourage me to do things, but it was more like, I don't know if that's for you. Like maybe we should have you take piano lessons instead. It wasn't anything. I mean, and they got it from their parents, right? Like they just sort of handed it down subconsciously while they tried very hard to balance it and of course encouraged me to step out of the box. They definitely, I feel like when I was a young, like, okay, for when I was in high school, I'm 2 years older than my brother. I had a curfew of midnight, but my brother got to come in at 1 a.m. And it was, my dad, like, girls shouldn't be out that late, which I get. I I totally get that. But my brother should have had to come home at midnight too. It just started to set this example that he had more privileges than I did because I was more fragile, I guess. That was my personal experience. What was you guys' experience growing up though?
I think you're right in that most adults do that. Like Kelly, you were talking about climbing across the monkey bars.
right.
So many adults say to their daughters, be careful, don't fall, don't slip. And the boys will like 100% just bite it and like, they got mulch stuck in, their face and all that. And they're like, oh, you okay? Brush it off. You're not bleeding, go. And so a lot of it I think is inadvertently done by the parents. The way that I was raised was different. My dad, now my mom, no, my mom very much was be a lady. I remember very distinctly her, I had to wear nylons to church every Sunday. I freaking hate nylons. I still hate nylons. And I would take my shoes off and play basketball with the guys after church. And she would get mad because I inevitably would have holes every Sunday. And my parents were teachers. We did not have a lot of money. And so to rebuy them, and I'm like, well, why don't I just not wear them? You can't wear a dress without nylons like that. Absolutely not. That's not a lady thing. Meanwhile, my dad was like, hey, you want to go outside and play football? He was a football coach. My brother's older than me, had zero interest in football. I was all in. I'd sit on the couch and watch football. I'd go outside and throw the ball like that. And so he encouraged it. I do remember when I did get to high school and I played in the band. And of course, we had the majorettes and we had the flags. You could wave the flags. And I always thought I didn't have the coordination to be majorette, but I thought, ooh, the flags are kind of pretty. Like, I want to do that. And he was like, no, you are not going to do flags. You are not going to do a majorette. If you're going to do anything, you're going to be the drum major. So he really set me up to be a leader. And I was the drum major. It was very natural to me. But I do think that we inadvertently, ooh, be careful. Ooh, watch
Yeah,
yourself.
because we're
Ooh,
scared. We love them. They're our
yes.
little beings
But
that
do we not love our boys?
No, we do. We just have like a different expectation of what they can handle and what's norm based on the legacy we've been handed down. So I think it starts early, Kelly, and I think it requires a person to recognize like when that's happening so they can make a conscious decision if they want to continue to that line of parenting or talking, or they want to change up a little. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not a parenting expert by any means, but I'm just saying, like, for me, it started young, and I just wonder what it would have been like, you know. I mean, it worked out fine. I'm pretty direct and I break a lot of boundaries. So I have the best parents. They're dear to me, but I do think they were influenced by the way they were parented.
I totally agree with you. And, I had mixed messages growing up on that matter. Plus, then I will throw in the older generation set. So, like you're saying, like my parents were influenced by their parents down the line, right? So, just looking at my own family, grandma was born in 1910, grandpa was born in 1903. Girls were a very different place at that point in society. And so she was raising her daughter in the way she wanted. And my aunt totally was like, F this. I want to go be with the boys. I want to go work on the farm. Because they had a farm in Iowa, but then the ladies and the family lived in town. So the ladies didn't have to live on the farm, right? Because it was a thing. But then, with me, it was depending, it was very weird. Like it was based on category. So if a boy was involved, like my very first date ever, I was so excited. I wasn't allowed to date until I was 16. So I was a junior in high school before I could go out as groups of friends, but like a one-on-one date was a
Same. That
big
was our
deal,
rule.
right?
Yep.
The guy walked in, checked me up and down, said, wow, you look really nice. And my curfew was midnight. My dad turns to me and said, it's now 10 o'clock. I'm like, that's in 30 minutes. And he said, well, better make best use of your time then.
Oh,
What? What are you talking about? Right? So we
that's
made it to
amazing.
McDonald's and back again by the time the curfew hit. So, like the whole sexuality thing didn't mesh well with the dad thing. Like that intersection was a complete miss. But then I was raised out in Wyoming for my early part of my childhood. My brother and I were in elementary school. They're like, so be back for lunch and just keep a tree between you and anything larger than you. Have a good time. And I mean, we were in Jackson Hole, Wyoming before it was Hollywood. I mean, it was
I
like
like
rustic.
that that's the rule. Keep a tree in between you and anything bigger. You see a bear, just go hide behind a tree. You'll be all right.
Yeah, like
Good
just
luck.
don't go engaging with it. And Kelly and you two watch each other and go fishing, right? And I'm just like, that's it, fishing poles in hand. We're going out into the wilderness of Jackson Hole where there are no people. Because people, that wasn't, I mean, people know Jackson Hole now. And I'm like, the Jackson Hole I grew up in was like, we had no vets. Like the vet, we had two labs and they liked eating porcupines so much. The vet over in Idaho Falls, where we lived during the week, finally gave my dad, who was a doctor, syringes filled with the weight of the dogs. So the dogs wouldn't suffer because we had no vets. He goes, okay, if they get into a porcupine, put them out, take a pair of pliers, get them out of their throats. I don't want you waiting to bring them back to me because the dogs are suffering, right? Like there were no services. So I had that dichotomy growing up of be resilient, but don't. I trust you, but I don't, right?
It kind of feels that way. I mean, I know my dad, like he was just so loves me so much. I was just like his little daughter. Like he doesn't want anything to happen to me. And it's a dad's job to protect their daughters, I think. Not that they're not protecting their boys, but you always have this special thing there. And I think that yeah, it gives you a little mixed signal on.
It does. It
But
does.
dads are important to set the tone for what a young woman should expect of herself and expect of others, the way to treat them. And moms, they have the responsibility of setting that too. Um, but I think men in general do play a critical role in the way a woman is shaped, don't you think?
Oh,
It
100%.
doesn't have to be a dad. It could be a grandpa
Sure.
or a
Oh,
family friend. A male figure in the home or in the life does help.
I was very close to my grandfather, and I still am very close to my dad. Like the two of us went to Ireland for 10 days, just the two of us. Like we get along really well. And we were just in Costa Rica, and he was like, I'll go ziplining with you. My 77-year-old dad. So I do agree with you that I think that those are very important relationships. And I do think that we, as this generation, and helping these younger ladies, we need to help them to look past that. And I talked to my husband before our oldest, she's going to be mortified that I'm talking about this on a podcast, but before our oldest had her period. And I said to my husband,
she's going to be mortified.
Yeah. She doesn't listen to me anyways. She doesn't listen to me. She's like, Mom, I don't want to listen to your voice on the radio. I'm like, okay, then don't. But for me, that was when my dad stopped wrestling. Like we used to like roughhouse, and I was really brutal. And then I had my period, and he didn't know how to handle that. He had two brothers. Like my brother came first. Like he was like, okay, now she's weird. So I had a conversation with my husband, because he would roughhouse with all three of our kids, both girls, two girls and a boy, and he roughhouses with all of them. And I said, I need you to, when they have their period, do not treat them differently. They are the same. Now, he is a vet. He understands how anatomy works, right? So he's like, well, yeah, of course they're going to get their period. Like, that's how nature works. So for him, it wasn't that big of a deal, but I made sure to tell him this was when I noticed a change. So please don't let that be for our kids. Please don't let them, so we try and normalize all of these things in our household. And that's, I think, the best that we can do is, when you talk about in the book, unlearning the girl rules, right? It's our job to help those to not be rules, to teach these girls a different way, and to try and be aware of it. And to, like, I do this with my team all the time. They'll come in here and they're like, I'm sorry to bother you. I said, stop saying that. Like, you don't need to say, you're not a bother. You are not. I don't want to hear that from you anymore. And I'm not saying it to be mean. And I appreciate, don't. Or can I ask you a question? Just come in and ask the question. Don't chitter chatter all around it. I don't need it. We don't have time for it. Let's just have a conversation. Mm-hmm. But it's those niceties that, we don't want to upset anybody, and we don't want to step on any toes. And, are you busy? My door is open. If my door is open, you come in. And so I'm trying to teach them that it is okay. It's okay to come in. And
I think that's so important, because I think another thing that we can do as women in our age group is help the women coming up the ranks. And I definitely see, like, some women are bitchy. Some women are not nice. Some women are, bless their heart, they're cutthroat. I get it. They're trying to make a name for themselves, and they've taken a no prisoners type attitude towards it. I've been around women like that. I think, like, a much better place to be for the greater good of our society is to have a bigger outlook than just yourself, and think about how you are influencing and affecting young women, because they are watching, they are learning, they are picking up on your verbal and nonverbal habits, and the way you handle, stress, the way you handle difficult decisions, disappointments. Women you might not even know are looking at you
all the time. All the time.
So
yeah.
Be nice to them, and don't insult them and say, you millennials, and understand and recognize they're doing the best they can, and they very likely need someone to show them or believe or listen and help them continue this path for all women.
And I'm going to add to that, because one of my little soapbox things, especially when I go out and I'm working with people in a customer service orientation. So like your front desk, Jenni, right? They're the face of the public. It's the first thing people see, everything like that. If somebody's wearing a name tag, I call them by their name.
Absolutely. I love it.
Because they're a human being who are trying their best, right? And then also, Stacey, my other personal goal is I run into somebody who has an edge to them. My goal then becomes a little thing because I like to gamify things for myself to keep things interesting and I don't get bored. So how can I make them smile? The females out there who have an edge. I'm like, how can I talk to them? How can I pull them out? I mean, I have a few minutes. Like a lot of times, again, those parent activities, I have some time at some of these events, right? How can I get those people engaged and smile? What if all of us tried to do that a little bit more? What if we all started calling people by names, men and women alike, right?
Mhm.
What if we try to find that really amazing gem inside of them and pull it up to the surface and say, can you tell me more about this? And that takes not a statement, but a question, right? And I think too, with younger women, I'm constantly having to say, you do know on social media, they do have editing tools,
Right.
right? I'm like,
Ugh.
so, and I can't even tell you how many times I've had this conversation with my daughter throughout the years, and she just is like, "Mom, I can't stand that you're in marketing because you take away the joy of it." I'm taking away the illusion of it.
Right. The
Like
joy.
the joy that they're trying to sell you something, or that this mom of 10 looks that good in the morning is an illusion, people. Like that is like that doesn't not happen on a regular basis. Like hats off to that woman, but with 10 kids, you're lucky you get dressed in the morning. Like that's
Right.
right.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think my biggest thing and what I try to do with my children, I my son, my daughters, doesn't matter, my team members, is I try when they come to me with a problem, it's not a problem yet. And I'm like, you are assuming something that has not even happened.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So let's take a deep breath. Let's look at what is happening right now. And then let's, yes, maybe make a contingency for how we're going to move forward. Let me know if you need help, but stop assuming that people
Mhm.
are thinking about you. Stop assuming that people are judging you. Stop assuming that, you are, alone in this island of your brain when, like what you said, Stacey, like, yes, I've had imposter syndrome, and I am a confident person. I have spent my entire life being that doesn't mean that I didn't have imposter syndrome. That
It's
doesn't mean that every
normal.
now and then I don't sit there and go, huh, I can't believe that just worked. Like, like,
Yeah,
not
like
sure.
when I had to spay my first patient, I'm like, I don't, I'm looking around like, am I supposed to be in here all by myself? Like, am I supposed to be holding a scalpel blade? Because I don't really feel like I'm the best person for this job.
Right.
Right?
I know I am a doctor, but am I really a doctor? But I mean, and the reality of that happened to my husband too. Like, I don't care where you're at in your life, you're going to feel that way. So I try really hard to have very direct conversations about this. Like, hey, it's okay to feel like you don't know do you want to practice having a conversation with me? Let's practice it. But the reality of it is the sky's not going to fall in. And
Well, the
you are making assumptions on something that hasn't happened yet and probably won't.
right, and
Just
I
go do
think
it. Yeah.
Right.
the thing to remember is things tend to have a way of working out.
Yes.
They tend to. They don't always. So, but if we're betting folks in Vegas, you could pull the Joker out of the card deck, but most times you're not. And things tend to have a way of working out. If you miss your flight, if you bomb a test, if you know, hit a bad shot on the golf course, like there's just a lot of things in life where we need not panic. We need not think about all the horrible things that could happen. I mean, maybe give it a smidgen of a thought just to keep it all in perspective.
Right. Keep it grounded.
Yeah, keep it all relative. But
That's
realize
true.
like if we're playing the odds, things tend to work out and it's going to be okay.
Right.
And I think once you can figure this, like just like you said, take a breath and think that thought, things tend to have a way of working out. Calm the F down.
Right.
And just because what you're doing anyways, spiraling and thinking and obsessing is wasting time.
Yeah.
Precious
Energy.
time.
It's
And it's
wasting time.
exhausting. It's exhausting, ladies.
It's exhausting.
It is.
It's so exhausting. So Stacee, speaking of time, we're kind of getting to the end here. Where can people buy your book?
Well, you can get it on Amazon, believe it or not, and just go over there and put in "Stop Acting Like a Girl" and it'll pop right up.
There you go. And it's in, I'm assuming, different formats. Like Jenni, you're showing the actual paper copy, but I'm assuming like it's like anything, there's a digital copy today that they could download and things like that.
Yeah, there's a Kindle version. So if you're one of those subscribers where you get unlimited Kindle, it's free. It's part of
Okay.
that program, or it's $12.99 in paperback.
Are you
And
going to
it's
be
a
doing
quick
an
read.
audio version?
I'm thinking about it because one of my friends is vision impaired, and I think, oh, I want to read that for Melissa. She would really like that. But then my other friend, she's like, one of my really good girlfriends from high school, she's like, I love your book, but I have to be honest, the words are too small. The print's too small. I can't, I've got to get my glasses. I'm like, oh God.
That's why we have readers, folks. Right
She's
here.
like, just record it so I can listen to it driving around town. I'm like, okay, I will.
No, I think that would be great. I think a lot of these types of books I do usually listen to. Like I'll read my smutty fantasy books all day long, but like these types of books I usually listen to. And so I think it would be very cool to hear your voice reading this. So
Well, thank you.
that's my 2 cents. But yes, it's called Stop Acting Like a Girl. And that's I can't get my camera to turn around so you can read it right, but that's what it looks like.
You can read it right. It's good. It just looks backwards to you. So you're fine.
Okay, fine.
We're
Thanks,
fine.
ladies.
Well, thank you today. And thank you for everybody joining Unfiltered Vet Discussions. We hope you join us in the future. And if you have any thoughts or stories from your own childhood that you'd love to share with us, please post it on any of our social media or podcast platforms. You can see all of them at unfiltereddiscussions.com. We'd really love it if you'd follow us as well on whatever social media platforms floats your boat, or all of them, actually. So come join us again, and we are glad you had a moment with us today. Until later.
Thanks, guys.